Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today, this evening. My name is Amanda Carrico, and I am the Interim Director of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's Home Wildfire Preparedness workshop and discussion. We have an excellent group of panelists with us tonight. And before I turn to introducing those individuals, I'd like to just take a minute to also introduce who we are as the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities and a little bit about the work that we do. We're a center that is housed here at City of Boulder, where I'm sitting right now, and our goal is to build and support partnerships in the Boulder community regarding the stewardship and management of our public lands. We're comprised of faculty, students, and staff at the university, and as well as representatives from many local agencies, including many of the organizations that are with us today, Boulder County, the City of Boulder, the Boulder Watershed Collective, and several others as well. The event that you're participating in this evening is just one of many ongoing initiatives that we have, many of which are designed to facilitate respectful and productive discourse about how we can protect our natural resources in Boulder, and especially in today's discussion, also how we can protect our families, our homes, and our neighbors. So I encourage you to check out our website. I think Erin can post a link to that website in the chat. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our work and our other ongoing projects. Also on our website, you can find materials and recordings from past events. And if you'd like to receive updates from us, you're welcome to sign up to that list as well if you're not already receiving those. I also want to note that we're very fortunate to receive support through the hours of dedicated volunteers, but we also rely heavily on donations of concerned community members. So if you enjoy and benefit from this event or other events, please consider making a donation to the center. You can do that through our website so that we can continue this important work. 100% of those donations feed back into supporting the cost of our research and for organizing events like tonight, which we are hoping to continue keeping as open and as accessible as possible. And again, we're really grateful for your support in any capacity, whether that be monetary or simply by participating in these discussions like tonight's discussion. And to that end, we're really grateful that you're here with us today, and thank you for being part of this evening. So before I hand it over, let me just say a few words about how this will run logistically. So we ask that you please remain muted unless you wish to ask a question, and you're very welcome to unmute yourself later in the session to do that. But to keep the noise down, if you could stay muted while not talking, that would be helpful. I also want to let you know that this discussion is being recorded and we will be making it available after the event. So if you prefer not to be recorded, you can keep your video off, and you're welcome to engage questions through the chat if you prefer to do it that way. So we're going to start with a brief presentation from our friends from the city. And after this, we're going to split off into two Zoom sessions separately with the city or with the county. So I'll walk you through how to access those two sessions a little bit later. But I also ask that if you could please just hold off asking questions until we have sorted out into those two groups. At that point, our time will be almost entirely devoted to questions and discussion, so you should have ample time at that point. Okay, so now, thank you for that. Let me turn to introductions. I would first like to thank Erin Freed with the Boulder Watershed Collective, who was instrumental in organizing this event and will be helping to facilitate throughout today's discussion. And now, next, let me introduce our panelists. From the City of Boulder, we have Jamie Carpenter, Operations Specialist at the city's Boulder Fire Rescue, Danielle McNutt, Life Safety Educator through the city's Community Risk Reduction Division, Brian Oliver, Wildland Fire Division Chief at the city's Boulder Fire Rescue. And joining from Boulder County, we have Jim Webster, the Program Coordinator at the city's Wildfire Partners, Brett Haberstick, Mitigation Specialist, also with the county's Wildfire Partners, Ben Fohl, Forester at the Colorado State Forest Service, and Maya McHammer, Director of the Boulder Watershed Collective. So with that set of introductions, I'd like to hand it over to Jamie Carpenter, who will get us kicked off. And Jamie, I'll be prepared to share the video whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. And thanks everybody for being with us tonight and giving up some of your time to learn about how to prepare your home for wildfire. What we've done is attempted to make a visual representation of what does a job done right look like in terms of preparing your home and your family for wildfire. First of all, this is an overview. It's not inclusive of every little thing that you can do to prepare your home, but we wanted to present some general principles that are applicable both to city and county residents to start the conversation. And please do write down questions as we're watching the video and in this introductory discussion. When we go into the breakout rooms, we're eagerly awaiting your questions and would love to answer them. I also want to give a special thanks to a few folks. Molly Kropp, who I'm not sure if Molly was with us. Molly is a firefighter for Boulder Fire Rescue, who helped us put the video together, as well as my colleague Danielle for having some of the ideas for the content, and especially Jerry Eggleston, who is our featured community spark plug. And I think Jerry's with us tonight, and we're really excited to share what he had to share from his experience of preparing his home and really his neighborhood and his community for wildfires. So we're grateful that he shared his time with us. And with that, let's cue the video.
Okay, great. I'll get that going. And then Erin, I'll keep my eye on you. If you could just give me the thumbs up to make sure it's going properly.
Sounds great. Amanda, it seemed to pause for a sec.
Okay, I think that may be cut out. Let me try again here. Apologies for that.
Hi, thanks for joining us to learn about preparing your home for a wildfire. Fire is a force of nature, and there's no guarantee that your home will be unaffected. However, you can significantly increase your home's resilience to wildfire. Let's start by hearing from a Boulder homeowner who has begun this process.
Hi, I'm Jerry Eggleston. We live in beautiful Boulder. Obviously, we're very fortunate to have this back. We've been in this house about 16 years, and when we first moved in, we did an extensive remodel. At the time, a lot of the things we did were focused on maintenance, long-term reduction of maintenance. But it turns out a lot of the things we did were also very fire-wise. This beautiful blue spruce is actually not ours. It belongs to one of our neighbors. And this is an area where we have worked with our various neighbors. This is one example where originally the branches of this spruce drooped down and literally touched the ground all the way around. Initially, we removed the branches, limbed it up by our garden and out into the common area field here. And then working with our neighbor, he set a rope, which you can see around the trunk, and that rope was his indication that we could remove any of the branches below that rope, which we have done, to lift the branches, the combustible branches, up out of any combustible ground covering. Midsummer, these grasses will get up to 2, 3, even 4 feet tall. So when they start to cure out, when they dry enough to be a fire risk, a neighbor of ours and I go around and weed whack a boundary around not just this tree, but all of the evergreens that either encroach in or are already in our open space, our common area, to provide separation. So we whack them down to about 8 to 10 inches. Any lower and it invites weeds, but at 8 to 10 inches, the flame height off of that, nominally 4 times the fuel height, we've limbed up enough so that we have adequate fire separation. When we remodeled the house, we needed to replace most of the siding. And so while we were at it, we went with fiber cement siding, non-combustible fiber cement, rather than the composite board siding that's on most of the houses in the neighborhood and used to be on this house. So that gave us a great leg up in terms of fire-wise construction. We have since done a home assessment with Boulder Fire Rescue, and that assessment taught us a number of other things. Things about screening of nooks and crannies, moving vegetation, combustible vegetation away from the house, and that sort of thing. So why don't we... So one of the things that we learned from Boulder Fire Rescue and our home assessment was that embers are one of the biggest risks in any wildfire event. So they pointed out various areas where we might have ember traps. And some of them are things like vents. There's one up here high on the wall. That one happens to be a false vent, but if it were not, we would have screened that with a fine mesh metal screen. Fiberglass is combustible, so we don't go with that. But there are areas over here by the shed where we had a particular risk, and we screened that with some metal mesh. The roof of this shed underneath the deck has a bituminous waterproofing on it, and that is combustible. So on the recommendation of BFRD, we have screened that area off so embers can't be blown up and under and collect on that roof. Given this particular situation, because of the joints in the deck, every year I have to go through and clean out the leaves that have managed to get through, but nonetheless, it still gives us protection in the event of hopefully in the event of a fire. Originally, this deck was all wood, and it was old, it was dried out, and probably a significant fire risk. So when we remodeled the house, we replaced the decking with composite, which doesn't dry out, and also replaced all the railings with metal railings. Largely initially for maintenance purposes, but it turns out it really is helpful from a fire-wise standpoint. The landscaping back in this area was originally a lot of combustible bushes and gorilla hair, shredded cedar mulch. And we've learned from the fire department that shredded cedar mulch is perhaps the worst possible mulch you could choose. It sends a creeping fire through that may go undetected, and even after the fire front has come through, can ignite things. So we have replaced the vegetation here with non-evergreens, which don't have the resin, so we've got lavender, and we've also replaced all the mulch with native rock. Here, just more of the area where we've replaced the bark mulch with native rock, and still dormant at this time of year, lavender bushes. You can also see that we have wood patio furniture. We really like the look. Unfortunately, it's a major maintenance issue, and it's also a fire hazard. So with the wood furniture, in the event of a fire, part of our preparation would be either to move this into the house or out into the field, or better yet, because of the maintenance issues with this, replace it with something that is non-combustible, which is on our to-do list. After our home fire assessment with Boulder Fire Rescue, this was actually the first mitigation effort that we tackled. This stump used to be about a 15-foot tall upright juniper. Major fire hazard because of all the resins in the juniper, not to mention that it was close to our fireplace chimney. So we've removed that, and this year we plan to replace it with a low-growing deciduous shrub in its stead. You can also see, or maybe you can't see because it's painted black, but we have put fine mesh screening underneath this overhang to keep embers from getting underneath and igniting the framing below. When we put solar panels on our roof a few years ago, before we could do that, we had to re-roof. So while we were at it, we changed the vent system. Right up at the very peak, you can see the tip of a ridge vent. We've eliminated the individual turtle vents, which didn't have very good ember screening in them. The ridge vent has a continuous ember screen along the entire length of it. And keeping embers out of the attic is critically important in protecting your home. One of the other things that we've learned over time is the importance for preparedness in evacuation. We were actually on pre-evac for the Flagstaff fire a few years ago. We were out of town at the time and drove all night to get here to do our evacuation prep. We've now learned a few things and have started to create go boxes. We're a ways from being complete on that. But one of the things we have done is to back up all of our computers onto thumb drives. This thumb drive is all of our important records, home inventory and everything else, insurance papers, you name it. And it's on my key ring, so I always have it with me. I never have to worry about going back to get it. As I've mentioned before, we work quite a bit with our neighbors. This is a very close-knit neighborhood. We're only 10 feet between houses in many cases. And so it's important to understand that our fire zones extend into our neighbors' yards, hence working with a neighbor on limbing up this spruce. But it also extends to what happens in the event of a fire. Many of people in this neighborhood are getting older, myself included. And so it's important for us in the event of an evacuation to check with our neighbors. We've worked out agreements with neighbors to check on their cats if they happen to be away, to try to get the cats out for them, vice versa for our dog. Anything like that to help our neighbors. And we have also been working, my background is as an architect. I've worked with a number of our neighbors about how to help mitigate their own homes. So this is really a community-wide effort. It's not just what we've done here on our house, but we and our neighbors are doing throughout the neighborhood.
Before we conclude, we'd like to recap and put an emphasis on certain items. First of all, these are 3 relatively inexpensive projects you can take on to improve the resilience of your home in a wildfire event. Cleaning your gutters, removing combustible debris from around your home, and replacing wood mulch with rockscaping are 3 relatively inexpensive projects that you can take on the weekend to improve the resilience of your home to a wildfire. In the home zone, moving firewood away from the house is important. Firewood stacks at least 30 feet from the home or into an enclosed area. Also, retrofitting wood fences where they meet your house is an important way to disrupt the fuse of a burning fence that could extend to your home. Especially in the area close to your home, consider planting fire-wise plant species. A list of fire-wise plant species can be found from the Colorado State Forest Service website. Also, remove the lower limbs of high-value trees in Zone 1. The recommendation is 8 to 10 feet, but this can be scaled based on the size of the tree. It's important that coniferous trees be spaced out an appropriate distance so that fire can't travel from one tree to another. The best source of information on appropriate canopy spacing can be obtained from your local agency performing a wildfire home assessment. Be sure to remove all combustible material from the area surrounding propane tanks. Replace those combustible materials with hardscape. It's vital that first responders are able to identify your address. Be sure that your driveway is marked with an easily visible reflective sign like the one in the picture. Thanks for joining us today for this overview of how to prepare your home for a wildfire. Everyone's property is different. To learn more about the specifics of how to best prepare your property, reach out to your local agency to request a wildfire home assessment. Thanks.
Great. So my name's Danielle McNutt. I work with Boulder Fire Rescue, and I do a lot of public education on the preparedness piece of wildland fire. So I think that it's really important, as long as we're talking about home mitigation, that we talk about sort of the emergency side of things. It's important that you anticipate during a disaster event that emergency personnel are probably not going to be able to meet your needs during that emergency. If it's a house fire, if it's a car accident, we can send tons of resources. But during a natural disaster, you can plan that those resources are going to be spread very thin. So, another thing I try to remind people is that the more time that firefighters are spending on life safety, on evacuations, on structure protection, that's less time that they have to actually attack the fire. So during any kind of emergency, there's a lot of things that you are unable to control. But I think it's helpful to focus on the things that you can control. So in the case of wildland fire, there are actions you can take to prepare yourself, to prepare your family, your friends, your neighbors, and what we had talked about before about preparing your home. So the 3 kind of points, or maybe 4, that I want to make is that we want everyone to sign up for emergency messaging. You can do that through bocoalert911.com. If you use a cell phone as your primary means of communication, you are not automatically signed up for this service. So it's very important people sign up. You want to have everyone in your family sign up. You want to have your home address, obviously, but maybe it's going to be where you work or where you send your kids to daycare, so that if anything happens, if there are evacuations, if there are pre-evacuations, you're going to have much better situational awareness of how you're going to protect yourself and your family and your home. So another thing I want to say as a disclosure is always follow your gut. You do not have to wait for that mandatory evacuation to start taking action. So go ahead and always follow that feeling. Your family might need a lot more time and maybe a lot more help to get going than maybe another family that does things more last minute. We also talk about go bags. There are tons of lists out there. And what I've found is that a go bag is going to look different for every family. Every individual is going to need different things. So, when we think about go bags, we want to consider all the people in your family. If you have an infant, if you have pets, we want to make sure that we're planning for everybody in that home. We want to make sure that you're bringing your prescriptions if you have family heirlooms. But like Jerry mentioned in the video, also important documents. Sometimes that's grabbing, a firebox that you have. It might be grabbing a thumb drive or a hard drive or your computer, but make sure you take those things with you. But think about individually what you're going to need for your family, because that does look very different. And then another important part of your plan is going to be your communications plan. During a large event, it's a good idea to have a meeting place for your family outside of the city or the area that you live. During a horrible wildland fire, there might not be electricity, there might not be cell phone service, there might not be the internet. So you want to be able to collect all that information in one place and write it down. And then you want to share that information with everybody who's part of your plan. And it's really important to also practice that. You should be practicing that communications plan. You should be practicing getting your go bag together if it's not already together. And you want to be practicing going to your meeting place, how you're going to get out of town. That's all very important. And sort of the last point is going to be your personal support network, especially if you have any kind of access or functional need. Neighbors helping neighbors is what is most important during those kinds of events. So if you have neighbors that might need assistance, you're reaching out to them before the emergency happens so that you can talk to them about what their plan is. You might have service animals, or you might have special equipment that needs to come with you. So these personal support networks are just as important as any other aspect of emergency preparedness. That's all I have, Amanda, about that, if you wanted to talk to people about how to get into the breakout rooms.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Danielle and Jamie. Okay, so it is the time to sort out into 2 different rooms. Based on our last set of experiences running Zoom webinars like this, we've learned that the easiest way logistically is to have you go to follow a new link to a new Zoom room. So in a moment, Erin's going to post in the chat window the links to either a room for the city or the county. So the city room is there now. So if you'd like to join the city room, hopefully you can click on that link. If it's not clickable, you can highlight it and copy it, or hold your finger down if you're on an iPad and copy it and push it into a web browser to follow that link. And the county will follow. Go ahead, Erin. If folks have any trouble accessing this, or if you're on a phone and you'd like me to read the number, just hang back. I'll let people sort out, and I'll stick around to help anyone who's running into any difficulties.